Please rise as you are able for the presentation of the colors and the singing of the national anthem.
Please be seated. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 32nd Annual Federal Interagency Holocaust Remembrance Program. My name is Brant Levine. I'm an attorney in the Civil Rights Division here at the Justice Department, and I am so proud to serve as chair of this program. For over 30 years, federal employees have been gathered annually here or other places for a Holocaust Remembrance Program. And why have we done this for 30 years? Well, first and foremost, to remember the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust and the millions of other innocents who died along with them. Also, to learn directly from Holocaust survivors what happens when hate and intolerance go unchecked. And finally, to be inspired by the courageous stories of survival from Holocaust survivors. And today, our theme is Courage Cannot Be Silenced. And soon you're going to hear from Dr. Eugene Bergman about his story of survival. And at 94 years old, Mr. Bergman still embodies the courage of Holocaust survivors everywhere. And also on the theme of courage, today we think of our veterans, because our program occurs on the 80th anniversary of Allied troops liberating concentration camps in Europe. And just a few days ago at a ceremony in Dachau, a 100-year-old US veteran there said, quote, "When we opened the gates of Dachau, it was only then when we truly understood what we had been fighting for," end quote. I am so grateful for these brave veterans, especially those from the 84th Infantry Division, who liberated my grandmother from the Auschwitz concentration camp in Germany. My grandmother also survived Auschwitz, as did my grandfather, but they are no longer alive to tell their stories. So I must bear witness for them to make sure that their memories are not forgotten. And I strive every day to carry on their legacies as a civil rights attorney for the Justice Department, heeding their call to combat not just anti-Semitism, but any injustice, no matter where it lurks, no matter whom it strikes. As a federal employee, I know that I have a unique ability and a special responsibility to ensure that nothing like the Holocaust can ever again cast a dark shadow over us. And I know that I am not alone in thinking this way, as this large and diverse crowd signifies. We have representatives here from nearly 50 federal agencies and components. We have thousands more watching online from around the globe, including Foreign Service officers and members of the military. And we, as federal employees, are not alone, because also in the audience today, we have foreign dignitaries representing over a dozen different countries. And also in our audience today, and I know online, we have representatives from nonprofit organizations, from religious groups, from educational institutions, and lots of friends and supporters. Thank you all so much for being here today. And I want to give a special thank you to our agency leadership that is here today, seated in the front few rows. We have so many agency leaders and appointees that I am not going to try and call out everyone by name, but I want you to know that your presence here means so much to us, and it sends such a strong message to others that you are here as well. So please join me in acknowledging the agency leadership here today. And on that topic, agency leadership, I want to say that the Civil Rights Division has been instrumental in ensuring that this program continued this year. And that brings me to our first speaker, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dhillon. Ms. Dhillon is a nationally recognized civil rights and constitutional law attorney, having founded both the Dhillon Law Firm and the nonprofit organization Center for American Liberty. She was nominated by President Trump in December 2024 to serve as the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. She was later confirmed by the Senate and sworn in last month by Attorney General Pam Bondi. Under her leadership, fighting anti-Semitism has been a top priority for the Civil Rights Division. So please join me in welcoming Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dhillon.
Thank you so much, Grant, for that kind introduction. We are gathered here today to honor the memory of 6 million Jews and countless others who were brutally murdered by Nazi Germany during the Holocaust. Men and women, girls and boys, young and old, tragically lost their lives as a result of persecution, hatred, and evil. The atrocities committed during this dark time are unfathomable, yet they're seared into our collective consciousness. First came the systematic exclusion of Jews from society, legally, politically, economically, and socially, as the rest of the world looked on. Then, the violent riots and vandalism of homes and businesses of the Jewish community. And finally, the awful, lawless concentration camps and extermination camps where Jews were first forced to work and die. These horrors precipitated the need for a new word, genocide, to describe the magnitude of these crimes against the Jewish people. We are also gathered here today to honor the survivors of the Holocaust. One of them, as was mentioned, we will hear from today, Dr. Eugene Bergman. These brave men and women withstood the violence and terror intended for them and stand witness and are an inspiration to us all. Their courage and fortitude are moving and inspirational in the face of unimaginable horror. Last month marked the 80th anniversary of the liberation of several Nazi concentration camps and death camps by our brave American troops. Gina Rappaport, a Polish woman, was one of the survivors of these concentration camps liberated by the American soldiers. She lived in Krakow, Poland during the German occupation. She was forced to relocate to the Tarnow ghetto. She spent 2 years in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in Germany, and she witnessed many horrors. There was barely any food, no heat in a harsh winter. She saw babies shot in their mother's arms. They were rounded up by age. The Nazis took every 10th young person and executed them. She narrowly escaped this fate by being the 8th person in such a line of 10. She obtained false papers saying that she was Aryan, so she could work in another city to provide for her sister and her mother. She returned to Tarnow after being deceived by the Gestapo into believing that she and her family would be allowed to leave the country. Instead, she was sent to the Bergen-Belsen camp, where she shared a barrack with 300 people suffering from severe malnutrition and illness. In April 1945, after 2 years in that camp, she and others were put on a train transport. They were told they would have to walk across the Elbe, a major river, in order that would almost certainly lead to their deaths by drowning. In her memoir, Gina states, "We were 7 days in the train, traveling very slowly, when we were liberated by the American Army on the 13th of April. It was the luckiest day of my life. At that moment, when I saw the first American soldier from afar, what a joy. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was sure it was a dream, but still it was true. I shall never forget what I owe to the American Army. I hope I will be able to estimate the right value, what the Americans have done for us. Now, after 5 years of suffering, I shall know how to appreciate the more liberty." Gina's testimony reminds us that the Holocaust was a deliberate attempt to eradicate not only an entire people, but the very ideal of freedom itself. The horrors included theft of Jewish property, burning down synagogues, boycotts of Jewish businesses, forbidding Jews from working in the legal and medical professions, internment of Jews in ghettos and concentration camps, and death in gas chambers by starvation by illness. We should be proud of the brave witness and moral courage that our troops bore in helping defeat Nazi Germany and fighting its evil genocide. They tangibly upheld the values we all gathered here today hold dearly, the rights to life and liberty. As the head of the Civil Rights Division, I am very proud to serve alongside many other colleagues in the Justice Department who are also fighting today for freedom to flourish in a different setting. The horrors of the Holocaust give new meaning to our ongoing work in the Civil Rights Division and in the government against anti-Semitism by showing us how very necessary it is to protect our religious and civil liberties from those who would take it away. We are so many years removed from the horrors of the Holocaust, and yet today, People in our society in the United States, because of their religion, are barred from passing across their campuses, from freely exercising their faith, from even attending their synagogues in this very city itself. The love of freedom occasioned by the heroes of the Holocaust is the creed of every American today. The right to practice and hero one's faith and exercise one's faith in accordance with that freedom is a very founding principle of our society, one that so many fought and died for. Under President Trump's leadership and Attorney General Bondi's leadership, the DOJ seeks to confront anti-Jewish bigotry wherever we find it in the United States and ensure that same peace and security for all people of faith in our country today. The significance of the Holocaust, the horrors of that genocide, and the absence of human decency should never be forgotten or lost on us. And moral clarity is ever more necessary today as it was in that time. Enforcing our constitutional and statutory laws against the violence and harassment that Jewish Americans are facing today is but one way that the United States continues to advance its promise that we will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Attorney General Dhillon. My name is Ellen Germain, and I'm the U.S. Special Envoy for Holocaust Issues. It's an honor to be here with you today, and it's a great privilege to represent the U.S. State Department and advance the mission of my office, which is to preserve Holocaust memory, pursue a measure of justice for Holocaust survivors and their families, and to confront Holocaust distortion and denial around the world. Last year, the State Department had the honor of hosting this federal interagency Holocaust Remembrance program. This year, we're very grateful to the Department of Justice for being the hosts. As we've heard, for 32 years, this program has gathered federal employees to honor the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust, as well as the millions of others murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. It also recognizes and pays tribute to the survivors whose stories, courage, and resilience have shaped our understanding of the Holocaust. I'm going to go off script a little bit here because some of the comments that we've heard have made me want to tell a couple of stories about the trip that I've just returned from. I just came back from Germany and Austria, where I had the great honor of participating in the 80th commemorations of the liberations of a number of the concentration camps that were liberated by US troops, including Dachau and Mauthausen. And I also spoke to a number of Holocaust survivors. And one of the things that I heard over the last few weeks from a number of Holocaust survivors was essentially the same story, the same anecdote. They said to me, when we saw the US tanks coming over the hill or coming down the road, we knew we were free. And one woman held my hand so tightly as she told me this, and she had tears in her eyes 80 years later, because she really wanted me as an American to know what it had meant to her to be liberated, to be freed by the Americans. And to be representing the United States at the liberation, particularly the commemoration of the liberation of Mauthausen, a concentration camp in Austria, where not only Jews, but political prisoners from some 30 or more countries were incarcerated, as well as Roma, Sinti, Jehovah's Witnesses, gay men. And so at this commemoration, pretty much every country that had prisoners at Mauthausen walk in through the gates of Mauthausen, and they lay a wreath at the main memorial. And the last ones to walk in are the United States. And to walk in behind the American flag, along with colleagues from the embassy, colleagues from the military, our Marines, members of the American community, was the greatest privilege, I think, of my almost 30 years as a diplomat and in the Foreign Service. It's a reminder to us all, I think, that, this was us and this is us at our best. This was us going in to liberate the people who were incarcerated, tortured, in the concentration camps, and I think it's a reminder to us all as federal employees, of what we aspire to and of the good that we can do, all in our own ways, as we strive to uphold those ideals that greatest generation truly embodied. So thank you all for being here for this commemoration. When federal agencies acknowledge the Holocaust through events and programming like this, we do send a clear message that hate and anti-Semitism have no place. We must continue programs like this one. Around the world, we're witnessing a disturbing surge of anti-Semitism, not just in rhetoric, but also in acts of violence. Holocaust denial and distortion, which are pernicious forms of anti-Semitism, are gaining traction. And at such moments, remembrance is not just a ceremonial act, it must be a call to action. Educating about the Holocaust is a critical part of fighting contemporary anti-Semitism. My team and I work with other countries to ensure the historical truth of the Holocaust is preserved and its lessons are passed on to new generations. My office works to bring a measure of justice to those who suffered the Holocaust's unspeakable horrors. We advocate with other governments for the implementation of commitments related to Holocaust-era property restitution and compensation. And as the United States is home to the world's second largest population of Holocaust survivors, we work to ensure direct support for all Holocaust survivors' needs to help them live out their remaining days in dignity. A fundamental lesson of the Holocaust is that the dehumanization of fellow human beings and unbridled hatred towards others can lead to wars that engulf the whole peoples, countries, and continents. 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were systematically murdered by the genocidal Nazi regime. They also persecuted and killed millions of others, including Roma and Sinti, Slavs, prisoners of war, Jehovah's Witnesses, and persons targeted based on their sexual orientation, and persons with disabilities. Nazi ideology was rooted in state-sponsored hate and grounded in the concepts of so-called racial purity and superiority. Jews were deemed subhuman and dangerous. People with disabilities were considered genetically unfit and burdens to society. Those who were blind, deaf, or had intellectual or physical disabilities were viewed as life unworthy of life. The Nazis often viewed the use of sign language by deaf people as suspicious or subversive. Sign language was even banned in places. The Nazis did not only see people with disabilities as inferior, they also saw them as polluting forces to be eliminated from the German future. When individuals were Jewish, had disabilities, or both, they were marked for death based on warped ideology and prejudice. At the beginning of World War II, individuals with mental or physical disabilities were targeted for murder in what the Nazis called the T4, or euthanasia program. An estimated 250,000 people at least with disabilities were ultimately murdered by the Nazi regime. Our esteemed guest, Dr. Eugene Bergman, is going to talk with us about his story of survival. Dr. Bergman endured the atrocities of the Holocaust at a young age. He was just 7 years old when a Nazi soldier struck him on the head so hard it rendered him deaf. But in a strange turn of events, being deaf, combined with his youth, the strength of his family, and the chaotic nature of war, kept him alive. After living through the Holocaust, he emigrated to the United States with his family. He earned advanced degrees in literature and philosophy, including a PhD in English literature. He became a tenured English professor at Gallaudet University and a published author. Throughout his career and beyond, Dr. Bergman has advocated for education, disability awareness, and human rights. Dr. Bergman's experience is not only a story of survival, but also of defying Nazi ideology. Even in the most mechanized systems of death, there were cracks, places where humanity, chance, and resilience got through. His story continues to inspire students, educators, and readers across generations, and I know it will do the same for us today. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Eugene Bergman, and we are also joined by his daughter, Sabrina Aharoni, who will provide the voice interpretation into spoken English for her father. All right, well, welcome Dr. Bergman again. And let's start by talking about your early life in Poland. You were born in 1930 in Poznań and had two older brothers, David and Bronek. Your family was middle class, and your father, Pesach, owned fabric stores in Poznań and Łódź. Your mother, Sarah, was a homemaker whose steadfast belief in her family helped you get through the years of trauma at the hands of the Nazis. In 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland, and your father's stores were confiscated. You were just 9 years old. So can you tell us about that? In the early days of the Nazi occupation, you were attacked, which resulted in your becoming deaf. Can you tell us what happened on that fateful day?
Yes. I and several other children, we were playing hockey. We were playing hockey in the street. We had a puck and a stick. As it happened, two German soldiers were passing by. And I hit the puck with the stick, and it landed on one of the soldiers. He got angry, and in turn, he struck me on the head with the butt of his rifle. Next thing I knew, I woke up, and I was in the hospital. I woke up and I saw a white-coated doctor come in. The doctor was saying something and speaking to me. I saw that his lips were moving, but I didn't hear anything. That was the moment when I realized that I had become deaf.
As a child, can you tell us what did it mean for you at that time to lose your hearing, especially in light of the terror and the chaos that accompanied the Nazi occupation?
I just accepted the situation as it was. I adapted to it. I lived through it.
Yes, you did. An amazing story. So let's talk about how you lived through it and about your life in Warsaw, where your family moved in 1940, 1 year after the Nazis invaded Poland. At first, your family lived there in the non-Jewish part of the city, but despite your family, and especially your father's best efforts, you were forced to move to the Warsaw Ghetto, the part of the area set aside for Jews in 1940, where almost 500,000 people were crowded into an area of less than 2 square miles. So tell us, did your whole family move to the Warsaw Ghetto?
No, my father stayed in the Polish part of Warsaw. He stayed there while I and my mother and my two brothers moved into the ghetto. My father stayed in the Polish part so that he could visit us in the ghetto. He would come and visit us every weekend, and he would bring a sack of food for all of us. Otherwise, we would have starved. He also gave a little bit of food away to beggars in the ghetto. They named my father Der Gut Mensch, and that's Yiddish for a good man.
What an incredible title, especially in the midst of such horror and such brutality. So really, the fact that your father was living with false papers in the non-Jewish part of Warsaw really saved your lives and perhaps those of others in the ghetto as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about your life in the ghetto? What were the family's living conditions?
So the four of us, my mother, my two brothers, and I, we lived in a one-room apartment. It was a very hard life. Any Jew who tried to escape from the ghetto was shot. And also, the living conditions inside the ghetto were terrible. The Germans crammed 500,000 Jews into a small part of the city. So there were about 5 to 7 people living per room. There was no soap. There was no toothpaste. And food was rationed. They rationed it to 1 slice per person daily. When you have food like that, people died like flies. And all the 500,000 Jews, they would have died in the first year in the ghetto. Were it not for food smuggling. They were able to, at nighttime, get to the ghetto wall and sneak in with sacks of food and help the Jews to survive. But the death rate was very high. Every month, it was about 3,000 to 5,000 Jews that would die of starvation. At the same time, the ghetto walls, or inside the ghetto, it was a living place for the most famous scientists, doctors, artists. We had a cultural life within the ghetto. There were several theaters. They had a ballet. And there was even a Jewish symphony and orchestra within the ghetto. That was life in the ghetto.
Can I ask, your mother was there alone with 3 boys, 3 sons. How did she hold up? How did she deal with that? Was she afraid?
If she was afraid, she did not show it. We 3 brothers, we always looked up to our mother. She was so calm. She had such a calm temperament. She was a wonderful woman. She never showed any kind of fear or any worry.
And for you, as a little boy who was then deaf, how did you communicate, and how did that affect your childhood in the ghetto?
I learned how to lip read in Polish so I could communicate with my family.
Were other children willing to play with you?
Yes, we had a courtyard, and the courtyard was in my building, and I would play with the other children every day.
And so then on July 22nd, 1942, the Nazis began deporting the Jewish population of the Warsaw Ghetto. They deported them to the Treblinka extermination camp. Over the course of 3 months, some 265,000 Jews were deported to Treblinka and murdered. So, Dr. Bergman, how did you and your family avoid being deported?
After that started, one day, someone threw a loaf of bread through the window of our apartment. My mother cut the loaf with a knife, and there was a paper there. And the paper was written by my father. And the paper said, "Sarah, you must leave. Don't stay in the ghetto. Avoid the trains." So my mother and my brothers and I, we went to the ghetto gate. And then my mother, she showed her ID card together with a wad of banknotes. She had the banknotes hidden so that the German gendarme saw it, took the wad of cash, and let us pass. And then we walked through the Polish part of the city, and we walked to the home of my father. My father was living in it was a partition. He lived in the kitchen part. And then the 5 of us, we couldn't stay living in a small part of a kitchen. So my father took us to Costa Hova. So he took us to Costa Hova.
So your story then became a series of moves to try and keep ahead of the Germans. And yes, first you moved to another ghetto in Częstochowa, and then when the deportations began there, you moved to the city of Kielce, and finally back to Warsaw, where your father again used false papers so that the family was able to live outside the Warsaw ghetto. And I understand you were there in April 1943 when the remaining Jews in the Warsaw ghetto revolted against the Nazis and held out for almost a month.
No, let me make it clear. There were two different uprisings. There was the Jewish uprising that was in 1943. And then there was the Polish uprising that was in 1944. The Jewish uprising, that is when I was already outside of the ghetto, and I was living in the Polish part of Warsaw. So from the window, I could see smoke. I could see smoke blaring in the air. The Germans were burning the ghetto. And by that time, I was living with my family, and we were living in the Polish part of Warsaw. I was, quote unquote, hiding in plain sight. I pretended that I was Polish. I even learned how to do the cross on my body, on my chest, things like that. I would go out on the streets. I would go out every day. And then came August 1st. That was in 1944. That was when the Polish uprising started. On that day, I was outside. It was so hot. It was so hot that I decided to go swimming. And I went to swim in the Vistula River.
And what happened?
I started to swim, and I didn't realize that the current, it was just so strong. It was so strong that I started to drown. Suddenly, someone pulled me up from the water, and they pulled me onto a boat. And the boatman said something to me, and I gestured, I signed to him, I'm deaf, I pointed to my ears. And then he looked at me, and he gestured to me. He said, take down your swimming trunks, pull them down. He wanted to know if I was circumcised. But I refused to pull them down. And then, for some reason, the boatman changed his mind, and he let me go. He let me off his boat, and I stepped onto a riverbank. And then something happened. I never expected this to happen, but something happened where I was standing and I saw a swirl of sand on my feet swirling around. It was moving around my feet, and I was wondering, what is that? And then I looked up and I realized I saw a man aiming his revolver at me. And then I realized what had happened. This gentleman was a Polish insurgent, and he was shouting at me to put my hands up, but I didn't hear him. So that's why he shot at me, but he missed. So instead of actually getting me, the sand was swirling around my feet. So I looked at him, I pointed at my ears. I said, I'm deaf, I'm deaf. And then he understood that's why I didn't surrender my hands in the air. So he let me go.
And so did you go back home, or as I understand it,
No, that same day, the Polish uprising started, and I was alone, so I couldn't go back to my home. There was fighting between the Polish people and the Germans. So I stayed in different Polish homes until the end of the Polish uprising.
and so really when you were shot at by the Polish insurgent, in some ways, your being deaf almost helped to save you, because when he understood that you couldn't hear him, he let you go, right?
Yes. But I was never shot at before. So wow, what an experience that was.
And then, since you were not able to go home because the uprising was happening,
Yes, I could not, correct.
I understand you actually ended up with the insurgents yourself for a while. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And then,
I was only 14 years old at the time. And that was when I joined the company of the Polish insurgents. I didn't do any fighting, but they let me stand. They let me stand guard as a guard sometimes.
and then when the insurgents were captured, you ended up in a POW camp and were then moved to a secret Nazi aircraft factory in Sazoni, near the city of Meissen in Germany. Yeah. And that's where you were when you were liberated. Yeah, go on, sorry.
Yes, after 2 months, the Polish insurgents surrendered, and then I went with them to a prisoner of war camp. I stayed in the prisoner of war camp, and I worked in that factory. I worked in there until I was freed.
And you were liberated by the Russian army on May 2nd, 1945. Can you tell us, that must have been an incredible day. What were you feeling?
Look, I was not thinking, I was just acting. I mean, I adapted myself to whatever was happening. Just like on that day when I was freed. I saw a column of German refugees marching westward. And then I saw one man, he was walking with a bicycle. So I took his bicycle from him. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I did that. And then I bicycled into a small town. And that's where I saw an empty house. And I entered the empty house, and I saw some food on the table, so I ate it. And then I found a train going to Poland. So I headed back to find my family. I was on the train platform, on the platform car. And in the middle of that car, there was a king-size bed on it, which laid there was a Russian officer with a woman that laid on that bed. I wasn't kidding, I couldn't believe it. And that's how I had come back to Poland and later found my family again.
And did you find all of your family when you came back to Poland?
No. Just my mother and my one brother. My brother told me that after the war, he met a man that had known us, and that man had witnessed a German soldier shoot and kill my father and my older brother, my other brother. My other brother told me that they were shot in secret, and I never told my mother. We never told our mother about that. We just let my mother hope that my father and my other brother were still alive.
There are really no words to express what happened to you, both through the war and then when you were liberated. At least you were reunited with your mother and with one brother. And then the three of you, as I understand, you were in a displaced persons camp for a while. And then eventually you were able to emigrate to the United States. So looking back on all of this, for you, what stands out the most for you, if anything, about the war and its effect on your childhood? Did you have a childhood, did you feel?
Of course, I had no childhood once the war began. The biggest thing that I learned about the war is how to pretend to act as if I were a Polish boy and not a Jewish one. I had to learn how to adopt a second persona. It's like I was two different people.
And that was a hugely important lesson that really saved your life.
Yes, but that was good for me in the war, but not after the war. After the war, I got to live a normal life without pretending.
So as we come to the end of the war and your story, and as you said, you were then able to start living a more normal life. You became an educator, and so in these days today of rising anti-Semitism, of Holocaust distortion and denial, do you have any thoughts on how we all, as just ordinary people, as educators, how can we best safeguard the history of the Holocaust for future generations to make sure that nothing like what happened to you ever happens again?
That question is a hard one to answer, but I guess one possible thing is that there has to be more events like this one, or other events on teaching about the Holocaust. Because, as you know, one picture is worth 1,000 words. So when you teach about the Holocaust, you also need to show photos and show photographs of the liberation of the camps. So you can see as they're living skeletons in the photos.
And even more than photos is hearing directly from survivors like yourself about what you went through, about your stories, because that really, I think, brings home to all of us the horror of the Holocaust and the need for all of us to work together to make sure that no such thing ever happens again. Dr. Bergman, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with us. So much, and now it's my honor to introduce Ronald Piaseczny, who will speak to us.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. From a young age, I remember my father saying, "Ronald, and also my brother Alex, get an education. It is the one thing that they cannot take away from you." As a child, I really didn't know who the "they" was that he was referring to. But as I got older and learned about my father's story, it started to become clear why he had said that. My father, Zenon Piaseczny, was born in Torun, Poland in 1930. His father owned a prominent butcher shop. His mother was a stay-at-home mom raising 5 kids, his older siblings. My father had just turned 9 years old when Germany invaded Poland, starting World War II. In the months that followed, my father's family was to experience firsthand the brutality of the Nazi campaign. My father told me how one morning his 2 brothers were attacked on their way, taken off the streets, placed in large covered wagon, and driven off along with others that were captured in that raid. My father recalled barely being able to escape and returning home to tell his parents of what had happened. Weeks later, he and his remaining family were awakened in the middle of the night when Nazi soldiers burst into their home, rounded them up, and forcibly loaded them, along with other captured individuals, onto trains that were headed to various other Nazi labor camps. This would be the last time my father ever saw his father. The soldiers had kept him and his mother together. He believed that on the account of his age and that he was a small, scrawny kid, as he described himself, that the soldiers had probably mistaken him for younger and allowed him to go with his mother. His siblings and his father were sent off to various other camps, separated from one another. My father and his mother Jadwiga were placed on a train with hundreds of others and sent to the Darmstadt labor camp in Germany. My father did not speak much of the horrors that he witnessed and endured. In part, I believe it's because he did not want to revisit those memories. And in other part, I believe it was that he did not want to scare my brother and I with the details. Of the few times that he did speak of his experiences, he would recollect some of the details. He told me once that when he arrived, he had to sleep in the stables meant for the animals, along with the other children that were prisoners. His mother was made to work in the kitchen, cooking for the soldiers. The experiences were painfully traumatic for my father, and it was difficult for him to share those details of what had happened to him in the camp. One story that he did tell us was that he was forced to watch Nazi soldiers take turns beating his mother over the transgression of simply stealing a potato out of the kitchen to give him something to eat. The nightmare for him ended in 1945, when American troops liberated the camp. However, liberation did not mean freedom, not yet at least. With no place to go, he stayed at the Darmstadt labor camp for a while and was later transported to another displaced persons camp in Liebstedt, Germany. The American Red Cross had set up operations at various different camps and were taking care of displaced persons. Through their efforts, they were successful in reuniting my father and his mother with his brother Benedict and his sister Irina. The Red Cross continued to work tirelessly and found a distant uncle living in the United States who had agreed to sponsor the four of them to come to America. They arrived in New York City, crossing the Atlantic by boat. My father recalled how he had tears in his eyes when he saw the Statue of Liberty. As a happy side note, I want to add that my father's two brothers were also eventually located. My father was able to sponsor, years later, his brother Zygmunt to come to America, while his older brother Oleg decided to stay in Poland. When World War II ended, my father was now a teenager. He had arrived in America at the age of 17. As soon as they processed him through Ellis Island, he boarded a train to Buffalo, New York, where the uncle that they had found through the Red Cross had sponsored him was living. At that time, Buffalo was a city of immigrants, with pocket communities filled with various European immigrants who spoke their native languages. My father was able to find work quickly and worked at various pizza shops and bakeries, all low-paying jobs with very little prospect for financial stability. Military service, in his eyes, was the only way to secure a future. As he put it, in the most broken English, I begged a Coast Guard recruiter to allow me to join the military. It was the only way I saw of having a future. The recruiter did assist him with becoming a citizen, and soon thereafter, my father was admitted to the Coast Guard. He served from 1950 to 1953, and then joined the Merchant Marines, where he served an additional few years. Upon leaving service, my father opened his very own bakery shop, building on the skills that he had learned when he first arrived in the United States. On a trip to Poland in 1973, he met my mother, and he fell in love, and they married. After 45 years of successfully running his business, he eventually retired. During those 45 years, he made some of the most amazing and delicious breads I swear I'm still burning off some of the calories from some of the things I ate. It's happy memories for sure. At one point, my father was the sole provider of breads and baked goods for 10 different restaurants in Western New York. However, sadly, in 2005, my father passed away. My father never had a formal education after 9 years old. He was self-taught, an avid reader, who educated himself by reading encyclopedia articles, books, and magazines. In another life, he may have been a teacher or a professor, but he made sure to pass on his love of learning to his 2 children. I stand before you today telling you my father's story because his life and his message shaped my worldview. It was through his actions and his words that I learned of love and compassion, but I also got to understand that the world also had evil and there were people who hated others. As I grew older, my father's words that he spoke to me about education began to finally make sense. In a world where anything and everything material can be taken away from you, it is knowledge and education that cannot be stripped away. Understanding history and learning from others helps us to shape the world we live in. It is through education that we see the beauty that can be. We are given the hopes and dreams of a better world, and we are equipped with the tools to become agents of change, able to craft that better existence for ourselves, our loved ones, and others. As time moves forward, we are losing those firsthand witnesses to the Holocaust and hearing directly from them their stories of courage and survival. Second and third generation survivors have a unique opportunity now. We are the torchbearers who bring those lessons into the future. Our work, our actions, our lives are the legacy of our parents and grandparents, ensuring that their stories of survival are never silenced and never forgotten. In closing, I am honored to be able to share my father's story, and doing so as an employee of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, where I get to help other veterans who have served bravely and fought for our freedoms. If not for American soldiers, my father would not have survived, and I would not be here. My father's legacy lives on in me, as well as in my brother, and the work we do every day. I want to thank you for your time and wish all of you to learn as much as you can from today's presentation. Take that information back with you. Use that knowledge to become agents of change and to make the world better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald, for those very moving remarks. Ronald is a member of our executive committee, and we have benefited so much from his leadership, his creativity, and his hard work. And Ronald's remarks are a new part of our program where we honor the descendants of Holocaust survivors, because as Ronald noted, we are the living links between the Holocaust survivors and future generations who will not know them. And I know Ronald and I are not alone, so let me ask, if you are a descendant of a Holocaust survivor, could you stand up now? So we have a lot of people standing in this room here, and what I would say is, after this program, go up to one of these people. Everyone has a story to tell. Thank you. You may be seated. We are now going to move into the final part of our program, the candle lighting ceremony. In Judaism, one long-standing tradition is to light memorial candles in memory of loved ones who are no longer with us. So today we are going to light the candles up here to remember the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust, to remember the millions of others who died at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators, to remember the brave veterans who fought trying to liberate concentration camps, and to remember the righteous people who stood up for Jews and died trying to save them. And I'm going to call up candlelighters one by one to recognize both agency leaders and federal employees. Our first candlelighter is Andrea Lucas. Andrea Lucas is the acting chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. She has been a member of the EEOC since being nominated by President Trump in 2020. She has been a consistent voice against anti-Semitism during her tenure on the commission. And she has engaged in significant public education efforts on this issue. And since being designated by President Trump as acting chair in January, Ms. Lucas has made combating anti-Semitism in the workplace a top priority for her agency, particularly in the college and university workspaces. Under her leadership, the EEOC will be a powerful partner fighting anti-Semitism at work and beyond. Thank you. Our second candlelighter is Leo Terrell. Leo Terrell is the senior counselor to the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. Mr. Terrell is a nationally renowned civil rights lawyer who has been on the front lines in the fight for social justice for over 30 years. Since being appointed by President Trump in January 2025, Mr. Terrell has led the federal government's Joint Task Force to combat anti-Semitism. Created pursuant to President Trump's executive order on anti-Semitism, this task force set as its first priority to eradicate anti-Semitic harassment in schools and on college campuses. Thank you, Mr. Terrell. Our third candlelighter is Henry Kerner. Henry Kerner is the acting chair of the Merit Systems Protection Board. And pictured above here are his grandfather, Leonard Krasinski, and his mother, Larissa Rappaport. Mr. Kerner's grandfather survived the Holocaust by fleeing the town of Anatova in Belarus as the Nazis arrived in the summer of 1941. His grandfather's parents and 6 siblings were murdered by the Nazis. Thank you, Mr. Kerner. Our next candlelighters are siblings Alana and Daniel Kuhn. Alana is an attorney advisor in the Department of Transportation's Office of General Counsel, and Daniel is a senior analyst with the Government Accountability Office. Pictured on the left are Louis and Serena Weiss, their maternal grandparents. Louis was a resistance fighter in Czechoslovakia. Serena escaped Czechoslovakia to America in 1938 with 1 sister, leaving her remaining siblings and parents behind who perished. Pictured on the right is Alexander Kuhn, their paternal grandfather, along with their grandmother. Alexander survived Auschwitz-Birkenau and Mauthausen and came to the U.S. as an orphan at age 16. Thank you. Our next candlelighter is Sarah Vogler. Ms. Vogler is a program manager from the Department of Health and Human Services. On the left is her grandfather, Henrik Vogler, who survived 3 concentration camps before becoming a writer, literary critic, and editor in Krakow, Poland. On the right is her grandmother, Romana Pronikna, who survived the Holocaust by being hidden by her family. Romana became a Polish theater and film actress, theater director, and screenwriter. Thank you. Our next candlelighter is Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is Deputy Assistant General Counsel for Environment at the Department of Energy. And Mr. Miller is in his 47th year of federal service. Pictured above are his friend and Holocaust survivor, Michael Taylor, who passed away last year at age 102. Mr. Taylor was a French underground fighter before serving in General Patton's U.S. 7th Army and later in the Israeli War of Independence. He later became a U.S. businessman and entrepreneur. Thank you. And our final candlelighter is Eva Fontheim. Eva is the chair emeritus of this committee. She used to hold my role, and she recently retired from the Department of Housing and Urban Development after 35 years of federal service, most recently as a housing innovation specialist. Pictured on the left are her parents, Margot and Ernest Fontheim, both Holocaust survivors. Margot lives in DC and is still alive at 102 years old. Ernest passed away in 2019. Pictured on the right are Ernest's mother, father, and sister, George, Charlotte, and Eva, who were killed in Auschwitz. Thank you, Eva. As we conclude the program today, I want to give a special thank you to Wendy Dornberg, Ronald Piaseczny, Michael Orlov, Karen Crump-Wilson, and Tracy Pirelli, who put in so much work to our program. I also want to thank our cellist, John Kaboth, for his beautiful rendition of Ravel's Kaddish at the beginning of our program. Thank you, too, to our Armed Forces Color Guard for performing here today and for their service to our country, also to our sign language interpreters who have worked so hard today. And I am deeply grateful for Special Envoy Ellen Germain's continued participation and dedication to our program. And finally, again, thank you to Eugene Bergman for sharing your story with us. It means so much. As we leave here today, may we all carry with us the memories and inspirations of Holocaust survivors like Dr. Bergman. Thank you for coming.